Welcome to episode 192 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. This is Melisa Lieberman, and today I'm so excited to talk with you about kind of the holy grail of lead generation, and that is generating inbound leads for your consulting business. So that's what we're focused on today, how to generate a steady flow of inbound leads for your consulting business. If you notice, my voice is a little bit scratchy today. I seem to have come down with a cold. That's what happens, I guess. And if you're listening to this in the real time, it's November, and I guess that's what happens. So anyway, luckily my voice still works. If you remember a while ago, maybe it was a couple of years ago, I got laryngitis, which I've only had once in my life, but it lasted for over a week. So I had to use some creative techniques to get the podcast episodes out. I had used some recordings from a webinar and kind of broke those up into a couple of different episodes, and then had my kids read the text introduction to each of those episodes, which was kind of fun. It's fun to have them and those memorialized on the podcast. Although at the time, my two oldest did the intros, and the youngest wasn't old enough to read the intros. So I should have him on the podcast here soon. Maybe I'll do that. That would be fun. He needs a chance. He's the third one, and he always gets kind of left out. Anyway, quick personal update. The craziest thing happened last weekend, or over the weekend, just yesterday. My oldest son, he's 14 now, he has fallen in love with flying, and he has this Microsoft flight simulator, and he's probably spent over 100 hours flying. You choose like real airports and fly in and out of them. So anyway, he spent about 100 hours doing this, and he wanted to do what's called a discovery flight, just to go up with a flight instructor and kind of see if he loves doing it or not. Mind you, he's only 14, so he can't even have a driver's license for a couple more years. So anyway, he did this discovery flight yesterday with my husband, went with him, and a flight instructor from the Air Force Academy here where we live. And it was so much fun to see him be able to bring one of his passions to life. He flew up to Denver from where we live in Colorado Springs, which is about a 45-minute drive, hour drive, depending on where you're going in Denver, sometimes hour and a half. And I guess it was like a 15-minute flight up there, so super fast. But anyway, the flight instructor let him fly the whole time and let him do the communications with the tower in Denver at DIA, I guess it is. Maybe that's not exactly right. But whoever you're talking to on this radio, if you're into flying, I'm probably butchering this a little bit, but he got to do those communications, and then he got to land the plane. And this was so exciting. So now he's signing up for some flight lessons, I guess, so that he can get his pilot's license when he's old enough, which I think is 16, but I could be wrong. Anyway, it was so amazing to see just how much that work he had been putting in, even though it was on a simulator, applied and helped him in real life. The instructor said he had never let anyone land the plane before on that discovery flight, and the writer got to do it. So much fun. And it just I was reminding him of the thing I tell him all the time, which is put in the work. If it feels 100 hours on a simulator before he went and he tried this in real life. And for you, putting in this work, it translates to what we're going to be talking about today, putting in the work to create the situation where you're driving inbound leads. And I'll tell you what that looks like, all about it here in a minute. The other thing I wanted to say is what we're talking about today, generating inbound leads, is a follow-on to the episode, I think it was 190, where we talked about how to generate more demand than you can handle. So if you haven't yet listened to that episode, I would recommend going back and listening to it after you listen to this one. But it helps you to see generating more demand than you can handle and what to do with it. And today's episode about driving inbound leads is one of the techniques you can leverage to create that demand in a way that's sustainable and scalable for you. Okay, so with that little story out of the way and background on how that applies to you, let's talk about today's agenda. So we're going to start off and just talk about what are inbound leads. You probably know what these are, but just to get us all on the same page here. And then we'll talk about the 3 prerequisites that you want to have in place in your business to drive these inbound leads. And then we'll talk about the 5 components of an effective inbound lead mindset. You cannot escape an episode on my podcast without talking about some form of mindset. And this part is really important. I find that this is a make or break. These mindset components that I'll share with you are truly make or break for you to generate an inbound lead mindset. So we want to make an inbound lead strategy rather. So we want to make sure that we know what those are and that you can start implementing them and building them up in your own brain. And then I will give you 3 very tangible examples of how an inbound lead strategy can look and what the steps of the process are for both you and your end client and prospective client, that is. And then we'll wrap it up with the 5 steps to put this episode into action. So that's what we are going to tackle today. Before we do, I want to remind you, if you haven't yet done so already, go download the book. Grow Your Consulting Business, the 14-step roadmap to make your independent consulting goals a reality. You can find it at melisabook.com, Melisa, only one S in my name, melisabook.com. And in chapter 9, we go over lead generation strategies. I go over that in a lot of detail, including more on the mindsets that we're working on today and more examples of strategies for inbound lead generation. So go download that and read chapter 9 if you haven't already. And of course, if you want a hard copy of the book, which is over 300 pages, so sometimes it's hard to read in a PDF, you can go find it on Amazon in basically any country where you might be listening. Okay, so with that, let's start off with what is an inbound lead? Again, you likely know what an inbound lead is, but let's just make sure we're on the same page as we're talking through this. And so the definition of an inbound lead is when a potential client actively seeks you out to express interest in your services, usually as a result of encountering you in some form or fashion. We'll talk about what that means in a minute, or encountering your content, or encountering your referrals of some sort. So someone has told them about you, and so then they come to you. It's them coming to you rather than you going to them, which is an outbound lead. So some examples of driving inbound leads are things like speaking, posting content, maybe on LinkedIn or Medium or wherever your ideal clients are reading content, participating in communities. Sometimes your ideal clients might be in a Slack group or industry group of some sort. Driving inbound leads through channel partners, so where they are sending you leads or referrals. Those are some examples of techniques you can leverage to drive inbound leads. So that gives us just a really basic foundation where we're on the same page about what an inbound lead is and where it might come from. So now let's talk about the benefits of inbound leads. Of course, you know what they are, but let's just make sure that we're on the same page about what they are and that you really take a moment to ingest this and think about how different would your business be if you had more inbound leads, if you had all inbound leads, if you had more inbound leads than you could handle. How different would your life be? How different would your business be? How differently would your financials look? How much more selective could you be, when you're at the place where you're picking and choosing between what projects that you would take on? So the benefits of an inbound lead versus an outbound lead include, number one, they've got a problem that they want you to solve or want to consider that you could solve for them. A lot of times when we're doing outbound type lead generation, we're trying to find problems that clients want to solve. So really just shortcuts for you, the ability to uncover a lead, identify their problem, and qualify whether they want you to help them to solve that problem. It shortcuts to all of that because they're coming to you saying, I've got this problem and I see you as an expert who could potentially solve this problem for me. Or I want this specific outcome and I see you as the expert who could potentially drive this outcome for me. So that's why there's such a benefit here, is that you're doing less work, less one-on-one work anyway of an outbound type of a strategy, and driving those leads to you, which are more qualified when they come into you, and you can be really much more selective about whether you take them on or not. So those are some of the benefits of driving inbound leads. For you, I would consider take a moment here as we go through this episode and think about, How would your life be different? How would your business be different? How would your financials be different? How would the level of fulfillment you have be different if you had more inbound leads in your business? Also ask yourself, why don't you have more inbound leads? It might be because haven't yet implemented an intentional inbound lead strategy. It might be because you think that you're not capable of generating inbound leads. What is the reason that you think you don't have as many inbound leads as you potentially could for yourself in your business? Answer that question for yourself as we go through. And it can relate to some of these prerequisites. So let's talk about what are these three prerequisites that I commonly see that you want to have in place in order to generate inbound leads for yourself. The first is clarity. You want to be really clear on what you offer and who your ideal client is. Because if you're not clear, then when you're out doing activities that would result in inbound leads, it's not going to be clear to those ideal clients. So, what this means is that you are clear on what you want to be known for and sought after for as a consultant. And it's usually one or two things. We'll talk more about the mindset around that because there's a lot of mindset that comes into play when we talk about this type of specialization. But you really want to have this type of specialization in place so that you start building a reputation and a brand around what it is you do and for whom you do it. So that's the first key here, is having that clarity and the specificity around what it is that you do as a consultant and why your ideal clients would seek you out. Number one, that was the clarity. Number two is that you have a very well defined, what I'll call a prospect journey. When you think about the prospect journey, there's usually two types, and you want to have these very well defined and laid out for yourself. The first type of a prospect journey is that you just want to make it really simple for ideal clients to get on your calendar when they have a specific need and when they find you somehow, whether it was through speaking or a referral or even maybe searched you up on LinkedIn. You want it to be incredibly simple for them to get on your calendar. So it looks like having that calendar posted everywhere. A simple Calendly, for example, where it's posted on your LinkedIn profile in multiple places on that profile, where it's in your email signature, where it's on your website if you have one, where it's something that is, you're putting it more often than you think is necessary so that it makes it so simple for them to get on your calendar and to understand that that's what they need to do in order to have a conversation with you. We have to spell it out so simply. I always like to think about it in the sense of, think about it for those types of clients where you assume that they know about how to schedule something on an online calendar. And so sometimes you might even not spell it out completely. You want to just spell it out so simply. Click this link to book a time on my calendar so that we can talk about X, Y, and Z, the problems that you have and the types of solutions that you want to create. Make it incredibly simple, make it incredibly easy. You don't want them having to go search through and find it on your website and worry about being too upfront on your LinkedIn profile, for example. We just want to put it everywhere to make it as simple as possible to get a call on your calendar. I can't restate that enough. I find it so often where I might be doing an audit for a consultant to see what optimizations they could have on their online presence, on LinkedIn, their website, whatever. And there's so often where there's not a simple way to just book a call with them. So just handle that low hanging fruit. If you don't have it in place today, go do it today to handle that low hanging fruit and make it as easy as possible for someone to get on your calendar. Number two, in terms of the types of defined prospect journey. So the second type of a prospect journey is where you're offering something valuable to them to encourage them to take a next step. So this is one step removed in the sense of your initial client prospect journey. In your initial prospect journey, just want it to make it as simple as possible to get on your calendar. That's for those inbound leads who are looking for someone like you and have a specific need they want your help with. Then we have the other type of inbound lead where they might be coming to you to figure out what is your expertise? What do you do? How might you help their organization? They're not 100% clear on what their engagement might look like, or if they even need an engagement. And so in this example, you want to also have available for them from a prospect journey perspective, a valuable offer that could compel them to take the next step. So that might be some form of an assessment or some form of a strategy session where it feels really valuable for them to schedule a call on your calendar. So those are the two types of prospect journeys that you want to have in place. One where they know exactly that they need what you do and can easily get on your calendar to see if you're the right person to help them. And number two, something more valuable for those that aren't quite sure yet that they need what you offer, and helps them to see, create something valuable for them so that they're on your calendar and you can start a direct relationship with them. Again, you can see especially in that second type of prospect journey, you can see why it's so important to have the clarity. When you know what you offer and to whom you offer it, then you can create that type of valuable offer for them rather than creating it so generically to cover every single scenario of how someone might want to engage you that it ends up watering it down and no one wants it. So that's the second thing. The first prerequisite was clarity. The second prerequisite is you having a couple of defined prospect journeys that are very visible and available to those ideal clients for them to get onto your calendar and start a direct relationship. And then number three, the prerequisite for inbound leads is you having a willingness to experiment. Now, this is really important. A lot of times we think we need to have something perfected or we need to have something that doesn't damage our reputation, so we don't do anything. You have got to be willing to experiment and try things out and be really bad at first until you get to the place where this is dialed in. So you want to create an experiment, right? Think about the scientific method you might have used back in high school. Set a hypothesis. I think that this assessment would be a really valuable offer for my ideal type of client. And so I'm going to put it in place and test it, write content or speak to drive people to that assessment as an example, and then test it and see how it works and adjust it from there. So those are three of the prerequisites you want to have in place so that you can drive inbound leads into your consulting pipeline. With that, this leads really nicely into the 5 components of an effective inbound lead mindset. We were just talking about that willingness to experiment and to be wrong and to not be as good at it as you could be until you put it in place and test it and refine it. And that's part of this mindset. So let's talk about the 5 components of an effective inbound lead mindset in a more specific way. So the first is that you want to have a mindset around specialization, one that might sound like specialization is beneficial. A lot of times we think about when we dial in what we do and become very specialized in what we do, that we can believe so strongly that we're leaving opportunity on the table. That if we dial in and say, I am a marketing consultant for high tech startups and I help them to build a go to market strategy, when we say things that are so specific, just like that example, then we worry that we're leaving opportunity on the table. But in fact, the opposite occurs. When we are specialized, it builds a reputation around what it is that we do. And I would say 1 to 2 specializations max for you. What is the reputation that you want to be building for yourself? What do you want to be sought after for? And specialize down to that thing rather than worrying about what you might be excluding. Start building a mindset around that specialization helps people to find you more easily. And also knowing that this outward facing constraint, so whatever you want to be known for, what you might be speaking about, what you might be writing about, what you might be posting content about, what you're talking about until you're blue in the face. That's your reputation. It doesn't mean that other opportunity won't come your way. A lot of times when we specialize down this carefully and specifically, other opportunity comes our way that we didn't imagine would happen because we're talking about one thing so specifically, that other stuff will come to you. You don't have to turn it away, but we want to build an outward facing specialization and reputation for you so that you are driving more inbound leads and people are finding you for the types of problems you solve and for the types of clients you solve them for. So that's number one. The mindset is specialization is beneficial both to you and to your ideal client to help them find you. Number two, in terms of an effective inbound lead mindset, is that you're the expert. And if you can't get to the mindset of I'm the expert, you could get to the mindset of I'm an expert. Ask yourself and answer it. How are you an expert for your ideal clients? Not worrying about other people or comparing yourself to other people or other solutions or other organizations that are larger than you. Ask yourself and answer, how are you the ideal expert for your ideal clients? You don't have to be the only one out there. Of course, you're likely not the only one out there in the world that does what you do. There's probably multiple solutions. The client could do it for themselves. The client could hire an independent consultant like you. The client could hire McKinsey to do this work. But ask yourself, how are you the expert that is best for your ideal clients in your corner of this space? And along with that comes with noticing and combating imposter syndrome. So oftentimes we argue with ourselves about how we're not the expert or how we're not an expert or how we don't know what we're doing or how our clients will think we don't know what we're doing. None of that is valuable to you. Now, listen, you're a human, so this is going to happen. But at the same time, you want to notice it. You want to be aware of where you're watering yourself down and then pivot to build that effective inbound lead mindset, which relies on you thinking of yourself as an expert. And if you are challenged with this concept of imposter syndrome, you can go back to, I don't know the episode number, but we'll put the link in the show notes. There's a whole episode around how to combat imposter syndrome. Okay, the third of the 5 components of an effective inbound lead mindset is that visibility is valuable. Visibility is valuable. I work with so many independent consultants as their coach, and they tell me that they really struggle with being visible. They struggle with, for example, posting on LinkedIn. Sometimes there's so much out there. I don't want to just add to the noise. And so they think that they don't want to add to the noise, so they don't make themselves visible at all. Or I also hear, I don't have anything unique enough to say. I don't know how to create content in a way that's valuable to my clients. And you might not. You might not be someone who's got a marketing background. And so you want to get into this mindset that we were talking about a minute ago of being willing to test things out until you get better. You can't start off and be amazing at content or writing valuable posts on LinkedIn to your audience, for example, when you've never done it before. You're going to be bad at first, most likely. Sometimes you're not, just based on whatever your background is. But a lot of times we are. But you've got to start somewhere. And when you worry about putting things out there when you're not good enough, then you're never going to start and you're never going to get better. So you want to get to the place where you're testing this out from a mindset of visibility is valuable. That even one thing that you share, maybe one sentence within your overall post is valuable to one of your ideal clients. Think about that one person that you're talking to that would find what you're writing valuable and write to them. Don't think about this mass audience of how somehow you need to stand out on LinkedIn, for example, if that's where you're sharing content, and that somehow you need to be this expert marketer right out of the gate. Is not required. You want to be thinking about that one particular persona that you know what might be reading your post that day and could find what you have to share really valuable to them in whatever challenges they might be experiencing or goals and outcomes they're trying to create in their business unit. And when you think it's enough, do more. Once you get over this hump of actually putting yourself out there and starting to post, then we start to question it's too much. Someone's going to think I'm doing too much. I should do this once or twice a week. I don't want to overload people. But the fact is we have no idea from the algorithms how much anyone is going to see of you. And it's so important for you to really create that consistency. And when you think you've done too much, do more, because likely your ideal client hasn't seen it, or they haven't seen it in the way that lands with them, or they haven't seen it with from the perspective of what they're challenged with that given day. You can't do too much when it comes to building your reputation. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to sit there posting on LinkedIn 3 times a day to have an effective inbound lead strategy. But at the same time, we don't want to limit ourselves just because we're worried that some people are going to think that we're posting too often. As an example, of course, there are different ways to drive inbound leads. We'll talk more about what those are here in a moment, but I'm just using LinkedIn posting as an example because it's such a low barrier to entry and an easy place to get started. Maybe not mentally easy, but definitely easy in the sense of logging into LinkedIn and posting and something and pressing submit. Okay, those are the first 3 components of your effective inbound lead mindset. Number 1, specialization is beneficial. Number 2, you are an expert. Number 3, visibility is valuable to your end clients. They need to hear what you have to share in some form or fashion. Assuming that versus assuming they don't. Number 4 is perfectionism is the enemy of your success. Perfectionism is the enemy of your success. Being willing to be wrong, being willing to post something and it being crickets and that not being a problem, being willing to post something and someone's arguing with you in the comments, being willing to realize it was bad when you look back in 6 months in the future and you look back to what you've been posting and realizing that was terrible when you thought it was really good. None of these things are a problem. But when you allow yourself to worry about doing it right, when you allow yourself to worry about, am I going to damage my reputation by posting this or being visible in some form or fashion to drive inbound leads, likely you won't be doing anything, or you'll be doing a watered down version of what it is that will be effective, or you'll be kind of tentative or tiptoeing into the process, which doesn't lead to results. Certainty and confidence leads to results. So you want to combat that perfectionism that likely is keeping you from taking action, as it does for so many of us. The last component of an effective inbound lead mindset is that you're assuming what you're doing will work. This might sound crazy, but oftentimes, especially when we're trying something new, we go into it with the mindset of, I hope this will work, or I doubt this will work, but hopefully it will prove me wrong, or let's see if this will work. Those things all create tentativeness. They create a lack of commitment, like full commitment to what it is that you're doing. You want to get to the place where you are rock solid that you believe that whatever it is you choose to do from an inbound lead strategy, and we'll talk about some of those examples here in a minute of what I've given you a few as we've gone through this around posting on LinkedIn, for example. But whatever the strategy is that you decide to do, you want to foremost go into this with the mindset that this is going to work. This is going to create more leads than I can handle. You want to have that mindset before you have the proof or the evidence to back it up. Because if you wait for the proof and evidence that it's going to work before you believe it's going to work, it either never works or it takes so much longer than it needs to. This is so important. If you choose any of these mindsets, and I recommend doing all 5 of them, but if you only were able to focus on one, it's you deciding ahead of time before you have any evidence to support this, that what you're choosing to do from an inbound lead strategy will work. And when your mind tries to trick you and question that, you're constantly redirecting it to, of course, this will work. This works for other people. There's no reason why it won't work for me. I know for sure that this will work. I'm figuring out how to dial in the nuances to make it work. Those kinds of redirections in your mindset are what will create that certainty. And then ultimately, people will be reaching out to you so much more because of that certainty and confidence. Okay, so those were the 5 components of an effective inbound lead generation mindset. which are so important. In addition to having that mindset is so important in addition to those other prerequisites that I shared with you. So now let's bring to life this idea of an inbound lead generation system for yourself based on 3 real life examples of how an inbound lead strategy can work or what it can look like. And what I love to do is think about, and this is what I work on with my consulting business owner clients, is we really look at what is the intersection of what it is that you believe, what activities do you believe will resonate most with your ideal clients, and the intersection of what it is that you would love to be doing from a lead generation perspective. And if you can't get yourself to the headspace of loving any part of lead generation, then figure out the intersection of what would resonate most with your ideal clients and the intersection of what you would hate the least. We'll say it that way. What would you hate the least to do from an inbound lead perspective, and what would resonate most with your ideal clients? So let's start thinking about what those intersections look like so that you can choose 1 or 2 activities that generate inbound leads for your business. So let me give you 3 specific examples that are real life, for real life consultants. So the first is where you decide you want to speak, and your ideal clients are in the audience somewhere in some, whether it's a regional event, whether it's a local event, whether it's a webinar online, whether it's annual, some type of a big annual event, or a podcast. It could look so many different ways. I always like to have a combination where maybe it's a big industry event where it happens once a year and you're hosting a breakout in combination with some podcast interviews and webinars or that kind of thing that you're hosting or panels that you're on. So that's an example, is speaking, of inbound lead generation strategy, speaking. So when you're speaking, then what you want to be doing is creating a call to action for your ideal client so that they can take that next step and reach out to you. That's the inbound part of it, right? And so what you might be doing from a speaking perspective, this example here from a real life example, is this consultant is speaking and they have an assessment that they've built out. I'll put the link to the assessment tool that I recommend in the show notes. But they offer an assessment at the end of each of their speaking engagements, whether it's a big industry event or even just a small podcast. They offer an assessment. So their ideal clients will come in and take this high level assessment using a tool, an online tool, and then that adds that potential client to the consultant's email list. And then from there, the consultant offers them a 45-minute assessment strategy call based on that assessment. So it gets them on their calendar. So the flow for this particular example is they speak. It leads the people in the audience to take an assessment online, which adds the potential clients to their email list, to the consultant's email list, and also allows them to invite that particular potential client to an assessment strategy call so that they start building a relationship, a one-on-one relationship. That is an inbound flow from a speaking perspective. The results in this example is that this particular consultant has been able to create 2 high quality leads per speaking engagement. So they know every time they go out to speak, usually in smaller forums like podcasts or kind of regional or local events, or even online webinars, it always results in 2 high quality leads. And then when they're doing larger events, it's driving both more leads and also more reputation building. And even to the point for this particular consultant where they hear oftentimes, oh, so and so told me about you because they heard you speak at this event. So that word of mouth that we would all love to have. That's the first example from a speaking type of an inbound lead strategy. The second example of an inbound lead strategy is where you're engaging in forums, where you're engaging in groups where your ideal client is a member. It might look like an industry association of some sort where you're part of that industry association and volunteering maybe to lead some kind of a breakout type of or subgroup, if you will. There's a consultant who's doing really well with this type of approach where they're part of these multiple industry associations where their ideal clients are part of, let's be very clear. You want it to be an industry association where your ideal clients are a member, not where you've got other competitors who are members. That which is often the case. So you want to make sure that you're joining those associations where your ideal clients are a member, and then getting to know the people that are running those associations and volunteering to provide content where you might be doing a webinar or hosting a breakout type of a subgroup, sub community even. And then from there, that's the activity, is engaging in a group of your ideal clients, engaging with them. And then the strategy would be that you offer them a strategy call to talk through their specific challenges and map out a plan around those challenges. So you might be offering, as you're engaging, even verbally or in writing, or when they go to your LinkedIn profile to connect with you, it's really clear and upfront that you're offering this strategy call to talk them through a specific challenge and map out a plan. Again, the more specific, the better. The example that I'll give you here is that the consultant is participating in this industry association, leading one of the subcommittees within that association, and then offering these strategy calls to each of the members. They're free strategy calls to each of the members, sometimes verbally as a next step when they meet each other, sometimes in presentations, saying, listen, if you want to take the content we've been talking about today into more detail, grab this 30-minute spot on my calendar and we'll talk through your specific scenario and map out a plan, whatever that particular situation is about, that they were talking with the potential client, whether they had met them one-on-one or maybe in a group relate where they were all listening to a certain topic. This consultant wasn't even speaking, but they're offering something that relates to the topic that they're all participating in. And this is, for this particular consultant, resulting in 6 to 7 inbound leads per quarter. And these are high quality 100K plus type leads. So hopefully that example gives you an idea of what it might look like to participate in a forum, in an association of some type, an industry association. This can even work. I have another consultant who's doing this just purely through a Slack, industry type Slack group, where it's kind of mid-level type decision makers in that group. And they're bringing this consultant into their organization and introducing them to the ultimate decision maker. So there's so many different ways that you can be engaging in these types of industry forums that then lead to you offering a really simple strategy call and then ultimately creating conversations because people want to have that strategy call with you and apply whatever they're struggling with to, your help to them specifically. If you think about it, it's so compelling and valuable for your end client to be able to talk to you because you see examples across their industry. They're in their own lane, working internally, and oftentimes don't have the benefit of seeing what's going on externally with other organizations beyond what maybe they could read in the news. And so you really want to be able to showcase that you can help them to see what best practices that they might be able to leverage, or what blind spots they might be having because of your cross industry visibility and experience that you have as a consultant. And then the third and final example from an inbound lead strategy perspective is writing. So we've touched on this a little bit ago, where you might be posting on LinkedIn, for example, or you might be writing articles on Substack or Medium or whatever your particular, or an industry type of forum or publication, wherever your specific client is reading. Go pick that place. They might not be on LinkedIn, or they might be wherever they are. But let's take the example of a consultant who has been posting on LinkedIn 3 to 4 times a week. And on those posts, they're just providing value. They're providing examples. They're providing case studies. They're providing lessons learned that they picked up in the past week working with their client in a way that is redacted, where they're not sharing specific client details, where they're just providing really small snippets of value to their end clients. So they're posting on LinkedIn in this example, and then their call to action, which they provide every single time in the post itself, or oftentimes in the comments. A lot of times, if you're sharing a link on LinkedIn that takes them away from LinkedIn. LinkedIn will suppress the reach for your posts. So if you put these in the comments, again, I'm not an expert on the algorithm, but often through my testing, I find that more people see it. So this example is a consultant who's posting on LinkedIn, and then their call to action is a very simple description of how to engage them. Again, this goes back to just being so overly descriptive of what it looks like to engage you, because people just don't have time to go figuring that out. They will just want to know very specifically. So for example, this consultant is just posting on LinkedIn, and then in the comments she says, if this issue sounds familiar to you, let's schedule a call so we can define what your specific challenge is and then figure out if it makes sense for you to start tackling that challenge, as an example. So it's a simple 2-step process. You get on my calendar, and then we have a call to discuss, whatever it is you want to discuss related to this topic. So it's so simple. And then she gives the link to her calendar. And then on her calendar, it lets them choose a date and time. And it asks, what do you want to focus on for the 30 minutes that we're booking here? Very, very simple. And this process for her, because she's been able to test it out and dial it in and get really clear about what it is that she's writing and how it resonates with our ideal clients, she's been able to create one inbound lead per week. One call on her calendar every single week as a result of her writing on LinkedIn. And then out of every one of those inbound leads, I should say it this way, out of every 4 of those inbound leads, one of them becomes a client for her strategy offering, her entry level offering, if you will. So that gives hopefully some really clear, tangible, real life examples of how you can be generating inbound leads. And there's so many others, right? But those give you at least a few examples so you can start thinking about how you could apply this to yourself in your business. So let's wrap up today's episode with the 5 steps to put this episode into action. I just gave you so much around creating an inbound lead strategy. You want to take a moment and really define one for yourself. Ask yourself, what is that intersection of what you think would resonate most with your ideal clients? Are they reading? Are they attending events? Are they in forums? Are they attending webinars? Are they listening to a specific vendor and that gives them their main advice, and you could create a channel partnership with that vendor? Whatever it is, ask yourself, what is the intersection of where are those ideal clients and what are they listening to, combined with the intersection of what do you want to be doing from a lead generation perspective? How do you want to be visible? Or like I was saying earlier, what would you hate the most if you don't like any of them? And then secondly, put those prerequisites we talked about into place for yourself. Get more clear about what it is that you offer and what you want to be known for and sought after for. And be okay with really getting super specific in your specialization. And when you worry about leaving opportunity on the table as a result of that, remind yourself that this is what creates inbound leads for you. And then thirdly, you want to be working on cultivating that inbound lead mindset with those 5 characteristics or 5 components that I shared with you. And then fourth, you want to implement. So once you get all that in place, start implementing your inbound lead strategy and whatever will create that visibility for you so that you get those ideal clients coming to you and you're not having to go out to them to try to qualify them and figure out if they need what you do. This creates such a great shortcut for you in the situation where you've got more demand than you can handle. Implement whatever it is you decided. Likely it won't work right from the beginning. That's not a problem. Evaluate, figure out why it might not be working. Evaluate, decide how you might want to shift it, and then refine it and keep implementing and evaluating until you've got it really dialed in. And it sounds like some of those examples I gave you where it's more formulaic. If you go out and speak, for example, it will create 5 high quality leads for yourself. Maybe if you do that once a quarter, that's all you need. But you've got to start somewhere and create a hypothesis, implement it, evaluate it, refine it until you get to that more formulaic creation of inbound leads. Now, I just gave you a fire hose of how to generate inbound leads today. The 5th step to put this episode into action is to get help. get help. It's so easy for us to talk about it here, but once you start to try to implement it, there's so common that you hit roadblocks and blind spots and get in your own way because of the way you're thinking. And so that's where I come in. I love helping you create this type of inbound lead strategy so that you can run your business more predictably. Book a call with me and let's see if coaching together is the best next step for you and your business to create this type of inbound lead strategy. You can find a spot on my calendar and apply for a consultation at consultmelisa.com. That's consultmelisa.com. We'll put the link in the show notes as well. And I will see you again next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.